16/01115/DVOB, former St Chad's school site, found on pages 17 to 38. And Matt, if you'd like to present the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I quickly go through the presentation for members who will be familiar with this application from the December 2016 Planning Committee. So the site in question is the former St Chad's school site in St Chad's Road. There's an ordnance survey of the site, St Chad's Road, running north-south along the eastern boundary of the site, and an aerial picture taken shortly after. Well, actually, that's 2014, but that shows the footprint of the now demolished school buildings, and that's how the site used to look. So that was a picture taken pre-2008, which is approximately when the school buildings were demolished. You'll note the quite modern buildings towards the sort of rear of the site, and the original 1930s, we believe, school buildings on the sort of southeast corner of the site. And that is the approved layout of the residential development, which was consented in 2015. I've got a few photographs of the site taken before the recent development was commenced. So these are from 2011, showing the footprint of some of the slabs of the former school buildings, similar. Towards the north and the former school playing field. Again, you can make out the former slabs of some of the buildings. Again, 2011. 2014, more up-to-date picture showing some evidence of some fly tipping on the site and the overgrown nature of the site. Site being grazed by horses there. The central part of the site looking in an easterly direction. And again, one of the former slabs with some evidence of some fly tipping. And these are very virtually bang up-to-date pictures taken in about the past 10 days or so of the approved residential development. So that's at the western boundary, looking in a sort of northeasterly direction, at the western boundary looking due north. That's the St Chad's Road frontage looking in a southerly direction. And finally, St Chad's Road looking east to west into the site. Now, members may recall the application before you, which was an application for a deed of variation to the Section 106 legal agreement, was presented to committee December 2016, and at that point the proposal was to amend the Section 106 agreement to delete the provisions for the provision of affordable housing. On the night of the committee, members resolved that the application be deferred, or consideration of the application be deferred, in order that the applicant consider an increased affordable housing provision. What the report in front of you does is, first off, set within the appendix the original report, but the beginning of the report sets out the revised offer which has been presented to officers, and that's basically two options for the provision of affordable housing. So option one is for the provision of 20% affordable housing, and that's 26 units, and retaining the £640,000 financial contribution, which is split between education and recreation. Option two is a slightly higher percentage of affordable housing, so that's 22% affordable housing. That equates to 28 units, but with a reduced financial contribution, which is £300,000. The balance here is to be struck is really between trying to maximise affordable housing, but also making sure that the necessary mitigation is also achieved, and by that I mean contributions towards education provision and recreational provision, which were consultation responses received and requests for contributions when the application was originally considered. Therefore, on balance, the recommendation is that the 20% affordable housing provision, so that's 26 units plus the full 640,000 financial contribution, is the preferred option. So the recommendation before you is in 3 or 4 parts, in point of fact. But so recommendation A, part 1, is to amend the Section 106 agreement to secure 20% affordable housing. Part 2 is to retain the £640,000 financial contribution. Part 3 is to make sure that the local planning authority's legal costs are covered in the negotiation and completion of that deed of variation. And recommendation B is that delegated authority be granted to officers to negotiate any consequential changes to the 106. So I'm not talking about substantive issues, I'm talking about any consequential changes to the wording which would follow from those recommendations at A1, 2 and 3. So that's the recommendation before you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that report. And with that, we'll now open the item to questions. Would anyone like to ask questions on the application? Councillor Otajola.
Chair, thanks for the opportunity to ask questions. Thanks, Matthew, for the report. And I appreciate the proposal before us. What I just want to link up is with what we've got in, I think, in 2.1, the 35%, which I thought is the requirement, and why we now have the 20 or 22%. I'm just trying to verify why, the reasons why we think this is a viable proposal.
Chair, reference, in answering that question, reference is probably best made to the appendix to the current report, which is on pages 23 onwards of the agenda. Now, what has happened is that once construction works were commenced on site, and that was in the late summer of 2015, unforeseen contamination was encountered on site, and that was asbestos contamination, which added to the construction costs. What officers have done is basically, so the applicant submitted a revised viability report to demonstrate that that the development, in their opinion, couldn't justify affordable housing contributions. Officers have had that independently checked. The other thing to say is that, and again within the appendix to the report, is that viability is a legitimate material planning consideration. This is a brownfield site. National planning policy guidance as well as local planning policy recognises that brownfield sites are often more difficult to develop because of issues like contamination, previous uses, flood risk issues, etc. So the proposal which was before you in December, as promoted by the applicant, was for zero affordable housing. Now, on its merits, officers recommended that in light of the viability report which was presented and in light of the independent appraisal of that. What the applicant has done is go back to the figures and rerun the figures, and they consider that a lesser quantum of affordable housing than the policy requirement can be sustained, albeit with a reduced financial return to the applicant, and that return would probably be realised over a longer period as well. So that's the balance the applicant has reached, and that probably explains why it's not 35%, but it's also, compared to what was before you in December, an improvement on the 0% which was proposed at that time.
Thanks for that detailed explanation, and I appreciate that. I think two things just to make sure here, that I'm sure we're not doing this. It's nothing to do with who the applicant is. I'm sure that's not the case. But in terms of page 25, I just look at this and just say, well, how much should we be reading into reports when they're in front of us? Because page 25, at the bottom of that paragraph, the last but one sentence reads, as the viability analysis demonstrates, the existing Section 106 requirements in respect of 35% affordable housing have a significant impact on the overall financial viability. And I think it reads further on somewhere there that they'll be in profit, but only just. That was before they've agreed to do this percentage. So 1 minute they were only just in profit. Next minute, because the committee has said, let's push it back because we are not ready to accept this, they've now come up with 22 units, which will still allow them to be financially viable. What I'm just saying is, there was one report which said one thing, and, if we just left it at that on the night, we'll think, well, we want them to make a profit, but now they've come up with 22 units and they're still going to make a profit. So what weighting do we give to reports like that when they have this type of comments? Thank you. And I think Andy wants to come in.
Sorry, just like to point out, I don't think there's any inconsistency there, but what's basically happened, as we previously illustrated, what you would normally expect, what a developer would normally expect, and this industry standard is around 15 to 18% developer profit. It was, with the previous proposal, 5%. They've squeezed that margin even greater still now, so it is less than 5% now, so there's very little left in the scheme. But the applicant's done that, having listened to the committee, so that they can provide that 20%, 26 number units in the scheme. So there isn't an inconsistency, it's just that they've squeezed that profit margin further still to be able to deliver.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the office has done a good exercise here. We've got something where we had nothing, so that's got to be a positive. We'd always like the 35%, but the thing I'd like to ask really is, can you just break down what this £640,000 means so that we can understand the financial contribution to the education and the financial contribution to the recreation? I think that would be most helpful.
Thank you. Matthew, you're right to come in now?
Sorry, Chair. Rather than hold up, I was looking to see if it was referenced in the report, which I thought it was, but I think we've just referred to the headline figure. I mean, from recollection, the lion's share was towards education. It's been referred to on several emails recently between colleagues, and the figure's gone out of my head. I think the rough split was probably 2/3 education and 1/3. 470 education. I can't. Yeah, we think it was circa 400, and probably a little bit more towards education. I think 470 is a figure which I've got in my mind, with the balance towards recreation.
And just so we've got clarity, so the recreation, I take it that's within the development as it sits now, so it's open space, etc., or is that a contribution somewhere else? I'm talking about swings and all that for the kids when they're playing.
When the 2014 planning application came in, one of the consultation replies was from Sport England. Now, they were a statutory consultee at the time. They raised no objection to the proposal, provided that a Section 106 agreement secure an appropriate financial contribution in line with the former planning obligation strategy, which is the £5,000 a unit. In fact, I think we've set out in the report, without that obligation, Sport England would have objected. So it is a financial contribution towards sports and recreational facilities in the immediate area. Within the report and I know it's definitely in the report because I read it earlier. When the 106 was being, the fine grain was being negotiated and finalised, a potential scheme was identified basically opposite the site within the King George playing field, so it would be used not necessarily on site but immediately adjacent to the site.
So in other words, we'll have facilities in that opposite field for the youngsters that will obviously come out of this area. That's really what I'm trying to get out.
The schemes which are identified by colleagues within open spaces and sports were, one was, I think it was a contribution towards a multi-use games area,
right,
or contributions towards refurbishments of changing rooms, that sorts of facilities within that park.
That's fine. Right, thank you very much.
Councillor Lydiard. Yeah, so the money the money has to be spent in the vicinity of the local area. That's excellent. Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions there? No. Okay. All right then. As this is a deferred item, we have no speakers, so we'll now open up the item to debate before we move on to vote. Would anyone like to start? Councillor Rice. Start the debate this evening. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Chairman, I think we must congratulate the officers for going and actually getting these affordable units. We would all like to find 35%, but the reality is there has been asbestos found on this site. There is a proper health and safety executive report. Everything does stack up. So I actually do welcome this recommendation this evening. It does give us safeguards. We are getting affordable units, and I think we should be proud because we've actually achieved something, and our officers have gone away and been very productive, and well done.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Lydiards.
I do accept that there were additional costs with removal of asbestos. I'm very pleased with the quality of the build as ward councillor. Very happy to accept that there are additional educational sort of needs in the area, and we could certainly use the money for recreation. I would like to be consulted when they decide what they're going to where they're going to spend the money, so that would be extremely useful to consult with the general public in Tilbury. But on the whole, I would prefer 35%, but we're satisfied with what we're being offered at the present moment.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor Lydiard. Councillor Churchman.
Yeah, I'd really like to just echo Councillor Rice's. I think you've done an excellent job in, from going from nothing to 20%. So, I'd just like to make that recommendation. It's absolutely a lot better than what it was last time, from nothing to this. So that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Councillor Artijola.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, well, I don't want to be the lone voice of... I just want to put on record that I think it's probably good for developers to try and do due diligence beforehand, so that when they are putting in their application and everything, and they are negotiating with officers in the initial place, they would have taken on board all the costs. I appreciate that it's not all the time that these can be found, but at least as much as possible, and just to make sure that it's being done at the time. Having said that, I would also want to compliment officers, but I also want to compliment members of this committee at the time who said, well, having a 106 affordable housing is not good enough, and go back and do some more work. So I'm pleased that the committee took a stand, and it seems quite difficult and almost harsh considering who the applicant is, but this is where we say it's not about the applicant, it's about the application in front of us. So well done to officers, and indeed well done to this committee too. Thank you.
Excellent. Are there any further questions? Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Chair. When we talk about, say, I think we all agree that the officers have done very well with this, without doubt. But the contributions going with the field across the way, would that be the Daisy Field?
Is that, the Daisy Field in the local area? I mean, certainly, Councillor Lillyard, you want to be consulted, so...
There are some needs on the Daisy Field. There's a very, very old changing rooms there. I don't know how much we've got, but it would be good to see those either taken away or refurbished. There's some need in the town as well.
Yeah, excellent. So if that is brought forward...
Cool, yeah, because for many years I've played football on the Daisy Field with a lot of two buddies, and it means a lot to us, that field. So if you can put a bit of money into the changing rooms, because it definitely needs it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay then. Did you
just for information, the field which has been identified is the south-east field there, so it's virtually opposite. I believe it's sometimes referred to as Daisy Field, but I think it's also referred to as King George's. Just one point of clarification, if I may. I was asked a question about the split earlier, and I fumbled around looking for an answer. I found the answer eventually. So the education, so the total is 640,000. The education contribution is 473,600, so it is the lion's share. And the recreation contribution is 166,400.
Excellent. Is there any further questions? Anyone like to debate any further? Okay, so just before we head to the vote, I would echo what Councillor Joe said. It was fantastic that the officers could manage to come back to us with that extra 20%, but that was predominantly down to the push. Councillors in front of me, Councillor Wheeler, yourself, Councillor Lillyard, Rice, I'll go for the whole committee really pushed for that extra 20%. So well done. This is obviously, there have been a few bumps along the way, but I know at full council yesterday we had a motion put forward to make sure that we look after these types of developments each step. This is a high quality design here in Tilbury, and these projects are designed to fill brown belt, certainly when it's undesirable for other developers, and it's certainly, I think now, given the amount of asbestos removed, has certainly led to a big improvement in the area. So with that, there is a recommendation on page 20. That's recommendation 4.1, and it's A and B. We'll be taking the vote as one. Just before we go to vote, Councillor Piccolo, as this was a deferred item, you won't be in voting. So who would like to recommend approval? Councillor Rice, and seconded Councillor Churchman. Okay, so all in favour of recommendation 4.1 set out in page 20 of the report, please raise your hands. Excellent. And that's unanimous across the committee. So we can say application 16/0115/DVOB, former St Chad school site, has been approved. Thank you very much.